All right, Shaunti, your research, and you have a mountain of it, looks a lot at the differences between men and women. Here on Loveology, we have post questions just for the woman. Here's one just for the men. And that is, why is it that sometimes we men feel like, we've been listening for the last 10 minutes to our wife, and then she says, why aren't you listening to me? Do you get that question the same way that we do?
We get that question all the time. And of course, every man has heard his wife say, I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen, right? Like every guy has heard that. And he's like, what does that mean? Because I am. And so here's the translation of that. So it turns out that that actually means I want you to listen to my feelings about the problem rather than really kind of the technical issues of the problem itself. And I know that might sound weird. Let me just explain this briefly. What we hear from a lot of the men, not all, by the way, because there are couples that are flipped on this, but in most cases, you men describe it as your whole lives. When someone is really emotional, like they come to you with emotion, like whether it's your wife or a colleague at work or something, your daughter, that your whole brain is sort of wired or trained to try to filter out all of those jangling emotions so that you can focus in on the problem and think clearly and figure out how to fix that, what's causing all of that emotion. And you don't actually realize that all those jangling emotions, that's what she most wants you to listen to. And so it's going to feel really weird at first. There's sort of a step one and a step two to this. And you don't have to take off your Mr. Fix It hat because I personally think that men are often very wired to be Mr. Fix Its. And so you can still be totally who you are, but that's step two. Step one is kind of filtering out the problem for a minute. Like your wife is describing that her boss embarrassed her in front of her colleagues and she's all emotional. Actually, don't focus on the, okay, so here's what we need to do when you go into the office tomorrow morning. Instead, literally focus on the feelings, all those jangling emotions, and dial into that. Like, whoa, was that embarrassing? Like, how did you feel when the meeting broke up? Were people looking at you sideways? And for you as a guy, you might feel like that's like throwing gasoline on a flame, like that's gonna make it worse. And the analogy that we tell men based on these surveys is that's the wrong analogy. Think of it more like you're pulling poison out of a wound. And as she gets all that emotion out of her, you'll see her relax and you'll see her be able to then dial into what you naturally want to do, which is to move to step two, which is, okay, what do you do when you go in tomorrow? But she'll be able to hear you then because she's felt heard.
So helpful. And I got to tell you, Shaunti, as a psychologist, as a guy that's been married to Leslie for more than 30 years, I still struggle with this. I teach other men how to do it. It's not an easy thing to do.
No,
And I know from a female perspective, it should be the easiest thing in the world to do because you go out with your girlfriends and that's what you guys do together. But for a guy, we have this part of our brain, the frontal cortex, that is designed to solve problems. And
yeah,
when you put a puzzle in front of a guy, that starts to light up and he can't help himself but to want to solve that puzzle. And so we have to put that in abeyance. And I practice this. I do. Every day I try to practice this, to put that in abeyance and focus on those feelings, to listen with what Theodore Reich used to call the third ear, right? Listening for the emotions, not just the verbiage.
realize there's two problems. The second problem is the technical issue. The first problem is how she's feeling about it. So now you're still tackling a problem, but it's dealing with those feelings first, and that might help.
Man, if any guys out there struggling with it, I hear you. I'm in the same boat, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. And you have the research to back that up, Shaunti. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. Super helpful.